Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they did. They actually got it correct. And this is Tom Novulis, your host. And today I have a guest with me is Aidan Haggard, and we are going to have a fun conversation. I am just going to let you know right up front that Aidan has more wisdom than you can ever imagine. And when he actually brings into context where he is, his background, and then we'll talk about some of his, the way I put it to Kathy earlier this week was that Aidan reminds me of a 10-year constitutional attorney that has his opportunities to practice before both the state and federal Supreme Court. So we should enjoy his articulated capacities here. And with that short introduction, Aidan, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and start with that.
Thank you. My name is Aidan Haggard. I am a junior at Medina High School in Medina, Ohio, as well as the president of the American Conservative Youth Union. The American Conservative Youth Union is an organization that I founded with a group of friends of mine who strives to produce in youth, and those particularly in high schoolers, educational values upon which conservatism and constitutionalism is built, as well as a well-respect and love for our country. With this, as many challenges have been brought before us, and it is through those challenges that I myself and my dear colleagues and friends have definitely strengthened.
Excellent. Now that's really key in that the organization that you started, all of that background information, what was the impetus for that? I mean, what all of a sudden, when we look at folks in a high school category, especially your year, if there's anybody looking forward to college, they're looking, how do we get that efforts going on, usually junior years when that all begins, or, the rest of them are off, who knows what they're doing. But what was the impetus to start this organization?
Yeah, our whole goal of the organization started back in 8th grade, way before in 2020, before COVID struck us all down. We were at recess and we all thought, hey, our parents are Republicans. That must mean they were Republicans by default. So we kind of looked into what it truly means to be a Republican and what it means to be a conservative. And we started to think this makes common sense. And we started looking into our government's foundings and how our America was built and the principles upon which it was. And with that, we found our calling. We need to make sure that those who are not enlightened to the American principles, to the principles of freedom and our Constitution, it was important that we do that. So of course, and then of course, COVID hit us, which was definitely a very kind of put us staying still at home. No way to prepare our organization for the future. But eventually, we slowly but surely started going back to the high school in order to do our educational escapades and whatnot in high school. And through that, we started going into more other clubs and whatnot. And we realized there was a niche that needed to be filled. There is a lot of students who are passionate about conservatism, republicanism, and government in general. And unfortunately, there was no void to fill that. And because of that, we tried to start a Turning Point USA chapter. Turning Point USA is one of the nation's largest growing conservative youth organization with high school chapters and college chapters all over across the country. And we started out as them. But the school instantly hit us with denial. One of the requirements to become school approved was that we go before our student government. Student government asked us a million questions, asking whether or not we would allow people of the LGBTQ plus community to join, whether or not we would discriminate against this person and that person. I said, all are welcome. If you disagree with us, I say you should come even more because of that reason. I said that we should make sure that we are an open place for people to have civil discourse in order to properly communicate beliefs that we hold dear. And even if you disagree with the organization's beliefs, certainly you agree that it is important that we have a host and a capacity to actually do that. But for the high school, they decided that they wanted to stop us. And this continues to this day.
So so if I may,
yeah,
at that point, you're talking to the student leadership, the body there, right? Like a student council type of environment. And you're working your way through all the, 101 questions. And how did you fare well within that student leadership?
Well, it's very difficult to say. We answered all of the questions in a very formal manner. We answered them to the highest capacity that we could within our time limit. And we answered every single one of them, but they still shot us down. Their excuse to us was that it was not a good fit for students, for all students of Medina High School. But to apply that logic to any other organization, not everyone likes chess. It doesn't mean that we should ban it at the high school. Certainly, you must realize that not everyone has to agree with you in order for you to have something to say and have something to do.
So what we're seeing then in your experience is that once again, if they want you to be open in conversation and to be inclusive in conversation, it has to be within the context of their definition only and not true openness for a conversation.
Yes, they only want civil discourse happening inside of a classroom. But unfortunately, the classroom is not always the best host of civil discourse. There are certain topics that cannot be discussed in the confines of a classroom, but must be discussed freely without curriculum behind it, without a censor behind it. There must be a way to express one's individual beliefs in order to make sure that you could really think about what you're trying to say. You could give it to people. You can get that proper feedback without the fear of retaliation. You can give your opinion and you could grow from that. People are going to come against you. They're going to say that you're wrong and they're going to prove why. And it is through that, people who are trying to say that you're wrong, you can grow as an individual. But the school would rather go against that and say that it can only be performed in a classroom setting.
Now, that's interesting because part of your proposal of the organization is education. So did that not qualify then from any type of classroom accreditation? Even if do you have a counselor from a teacher counselor, a teacher aide, or somebody from the staff that kind of saddled up next to you guys?
Yeah, so we had an individual who took over our organization. The legal term was host. The
Hmm.
school, it's our third year now that we've been trying to get school sponsored and trying to be able to meet in the school. We still haven't been able to. It's our third year now, and we had a person who would let us meet under the conditionality terms of what's called the Equal Access Act. The
Hmm.
Equal Access Act was passed in 1984 by Congress, essentially saying that anyone or any organization or high school that allows a club to meet must allow other clubs to meet without regards to the basis of religious, political, or philosophical content of the meeting. In the speech that is being said, we looked at this as our golden key to our success. We studied the law with great ferocity. We looked into every single court case that could ever deal with it. We quite literally know the court cases off the back of our head. We went to our county law library in the bottom of our basement, of the basement of our courthouse, and we studied the law. And I think it is through that we became better individuals. But knowing the law was our key to success. If you do not know the rules that are being put against you, you can never truly succeed. You must know the confines upon which you must live in order to truly live your life to the fullest capacity. And it is with that we continued our knowledge. But one thing that really made us study even more is when we were meeting with our superintendent of our school, he said that, quote, you should probably stop looking into law because it's not going to help you. And it was at that moment that I knew that law is going to be our key to success. If someone says stop looking into something and
Yeah.
stop trying so hard,
Right.
you're probably doing something right.
Right. Yeah. So, with the ability to take and bring that forward, and then you not only went to the student council, you met with then the staff, the principal, and I'm sure that senior staff there. But you said you met with the superintendent as well. So, in the covering of all of the administrative aspects of how you should have been accepted, and in reference to the fact that there's other clubs on campus as
Mhm.
well, and yet to say no to you, what's their excuse to date, and what's your next steps?
Well, the largest excuse they went behind for student council was that it was not a good fit for all students of Medina High School. For members of the staff, they claim that Turning Point USA, who we used to be, was an activist organization. But to many extents, almost every single organization at the high school is an activist. But what it sounded like to me was they were just trying to give an excuse for
Right.
an unwinnable argument. But to have denied us is to say that this educational institution is superior to us, the bearer of rights and the distributor of privileges, the proctor of thought ideology and the judge of thought correctness. And they truly are complicit in the act of censoring us as
Mhm.
individuals, act acting as the censoring of differing opinions. And it is because of this that we must realize that they don't truly want civil discourse. They don't truly want you to think differently. They're just trying to make you think like everyone else, you know?
Sure. I think you're such a challenge to them that they don't know what to do. Have they brought in their counsel in regard? Because usually the counsel for entities like that is the county prosecutor. And have you had any interactions with the county prosecutor in respect to what the school's doing, or have they approached you at all?
Yes, we have through many avenues tried to approach legal hope for our future. I mean, obviously, we're only a group of teenagers, so there's no way we can afford our own attorney.
Right.
So we went to the district or the attorney general's office of the state of Ohio, and they said, rightfully so, that they can only enforce federal criminal statute and not federal civil. They referred me to our county prosecutor, and he said, that he unfortunately cannot help us. And it is through this that I realized that we are kind of being thrown around the machine in like we're cogs of the machine, not because they don't want to help us. Trust me, the legal system of the state of Ohio would like to help us if they could, but unfortunately they can't because of the rules put there.
Right. The rules and how the prosecutors prosecute the local criminal cases, but when it comes to entities like school boards, county government, any forms of government, or any of the taxing authorities, they have to represent those taxing authorities. And so school boards fall within that. So you therefore, don't get any representation. All they can do is guide the staff into how they should approach it, especially if you bring any type of legal action against them. Then they have. I've been on a county board of mental health, and so I did a lot of stuff with our legal team and how it worked with the prosecutors being our counsel for those board members. But to your point is that that now. Have you looked at, or I know that the conference call that we were on with the Ohio Freedom, the Ohio Fan, as I always call it, I think that's the call you were on with where I met you, is that there was someone there that thought that they might be able to find some legal assistance for you. Did you ever close that loop, or was that loop closed for you?
We are currently still looking into it. Obviously, we have to be careful about our decisions.
Right.
We're still looking into that, and we are definitely looking and seeking for justice. We are indignant in the proper way. A group of individuals, we've been done wrong, and the school is clearly improper. The irony in that lies that the United States Department of Education has a publication about this exact act, this Equal Access Act that we hide behind as our defense, and it ironically says that you must not only give them equal access to space, but also other things that the school is prohibiting us from using, such as the morning announcements, bulletin boards, what have you. The school is prohibiting us, despite everybody else who has any kind of legal standing or any understanding of the law says otherwise. But they know, because they're a government entity, who's going to stop them. So the question that goes before us is, who will guard the guards themselves?
Yes, that comes to it. And then, it's part of that understanding, and we'll carry on to it when we get into the second segment, is around the election process and who's on the school boards. How do the school boards take and hire superintendents, and how do superintendents work at hiring principals, the staff? Just real quick before we get down to the last minute, we'll carry this question over as well. So what is the wokeness inside of the Medina school system?
It is very palatable. There isn't much there to kind of critique, to what I have experienced. There is not much outside of our own curriculum that could be identified as wokeness. We are thankful to be, I am thankful personally to go to a high school, which when it comes to the classroom experience is relatively neutral in politics. And of course, in certain instances where it's important for a teacher to have a political discussion and to have their say, it is there. I'm on the speech and debate team, and oftentimes I would have with my speech and debate coaches political discussion. They are giving their partisan beliefs, as they should. But when it comes to classroom instruction, where kids are most vulnerable and unable to determine what's right and what's wrong, and what's truth and what is political belief, we are thankful to have not too much wokeness when it comes to that. But unfortunately, we still see in our administration that short level of wokeness that kind of stops us.
All right, good. We're going to carry all that over into the second segment of Samuel Adams Returns with those anti-federalists getting it absolutely correct. And my guest, Aidan Haggard. And Aidan, I'm really delighted that you are with us, and we will get back to everybody here in a couple of minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second segment of Samuel Adams Returns with my guest, Aidan Haggard. And we're going to continue on the conversation that we left last in relationship to the question I asked about the wokeness there in the Medina School District in general, but then specifically when we get to his experience in the high school itself. And I'll pose this question, hang on to it here for a moment, Aidan, how many high schools there are in Medina County? And then we'll expand into this whole thought process of what is it that they can't see that, in fact, they're gross violation of the law based on what perceptions, what are they trying to prove? Because from what you're inferring, they're really not ideologically minded overall, even into the classroom. So you can pick up and explain, some of that. You're not seeing the heavy ideological push that we're seeing in other school districts, but yet, they're holding this ground of, no, you don't fit here. So go ahead and pick up on your thoughts on that and, what it is that you see the direction of it going.
Certainly, like I said earlier, we are thankful in my high school, Medina High School, to not have at the classroom level wokeness that we see in many other high schools on the news. Where they fall flat is at the administration. The administration does in a sneaky way. I grant them this, they do it in a relatively sneaky way to where it's not perceivable to the naked eye. They will limit what you can and cannot say. For the school, it is easier to attack an individual rather than just to attack his beliefs. The school would, rather than attacking an entire argument, and in our arguments, they would rather shut down the entire argument itself. It is easier to never host political discussion than to defend your own. But if our school does not, through discourse and political thought, make an attempt to educate students for the future, for what purpose does the school serve? The school does not train, if the school does not train students on what to look for in candidates, how to think for oneself and how to think critically, how can we trust them to fulfill basic arithmetic and basic math? How can we trust them to exercise the most important right of them all, the right to vote? If we cannot fulfill in one, the proper process of how to fulfill the core tenets of our republic, how can we trust them to fulfill basic tenets of life, such as reading and writing in the pupils? We must have a focus on reading, writing, arithmetic, civics, constitutional history, and civil discourse in our educational institution. Anything else is truly a waste, in my opinion. But if we cannot fulfill this, if school cannot fulfill this, then school is truly poison at the root of the tree of learning. So I think it's important that it's not just teachers who are deciding what is being taught. You must pay attention. You as a citizen must pay attention to your local government. Your local government will affect you much more, by and large, than your federal and state will. So it's important to look at your local government, but especially the school board. Your students, whether you have a child in the educational system or whether or not you have one that graduated or not yet in there, they will be the future. This educational institution is training our future. So it's an important investment of yourself and into the community to investigate what is going on in your high schools. Right. But I am but one man. We cannot truly rely on the actions of others to save the lives of ours. We must work together to look into this.
Right. Yeah. Sam Adams, I don't know how much you know about him other than maybe some TV show or something like that that's out there. But, Sam's always looked at it that the best government and the most important government is our local government. And he was heavily involved in education. In fact, he was one of the early founders that wanted girls to be educated equal to boys. And one of his greatest friends and peers was Mercy Otis Warren. So I don't know if you know anything about her as well, but she is just phenomenal. She was one of the guys there in the Boston arena. So if you ever get an opportunity to read up on her, maybe I'll send you some links on her as well, because she was an anti-federalist. She wrote the history of the American Revolution to the extent that Thomas Jefferson had it published and made sure that every member of Congress received a copy of it when he was president. So that's how influential she was. But when we come to understanding everything that you're saying, and basically almost a plea to everybody that's listening, is the fact that education is that important, and it's not about people finding jobs. And too often that's what we're seeing in our educational system, is that, do we put them in the pipeline for college, or now they're coming up with trade schools, so do we put them in a pipeline for trade schools? And myself, I've been involved in a lot in the educational system in the past, especially on different types of boards to help make some of those decisions and directions, not the school board directly, but other ancillary boards. So when we look at that and we take it back from a founder's perspective, the key takeaway from what you were saying is, how do we become good, solid citizens, thinking citizens? And to that, and what you're engaging in there at Medina High School, is that what is that perception of that overall staff and the overall leadership in the district in relationship to what is the outcome they want for students? Is it to plug them into colleges, or plug them in, or just get them through as best they can following a curriculum? Or they're afraid of, in my opinion, from listening to you, they're afraid, as most school districts are, is to have that ability to debate and have that ability to have thinking citizens. So with all of that I rambled on about, what's your thought on what is it that the district's outcome is trying to be versus the outcome that you're asking for?
Yeah, to start off, at our high school, for every registered Democrat, every 3 registered Democrats, there is 1 registered Republican, which means that the Republicans are the ideological minority when it comes to the staff at our high school. And because of that, the individuals who affiliate with the Republican Party and the Republican movement are less likely to speak out to their students and to their peers about their beliefs. Now, by all means, these kind of beliefs shouldn't really be in a classroom setting unless either prescribed by law or asked by a student to a certain extent. But they are still there. The Democrats, however, the Democratic teachers, are more likely to give their opinion when simply either the law of curriculum says they shouldn't, or a student doesn't truly ask for them. So with this context of knowing that ideologically the staff of most school districts, and ours included, are very democratically, heavily democratically led, it's strange to know that the students, however, are most likely of the conservative and the Republican mindset and the Republican ideology. If you look at our town's voting history, we almost always vote Republican. As a matter of fact, our last general election, not a single Democrat was elected in our county. So we hold the ideological majority, but what the school realizes is that they have the strong point. They realize that it is the Democratic students and the liberal students who are more likely to speak out about their beliefs, and the conservatives are more likely to step back, play defense instead of offense with their political beliefs. They'll say their beliefs when they are asked about them, but they'll never give them openly. But they realize that if an institution like ours, the American Conservative Youth Union, were to inform students of what you could gain from politics, of what you could see and what future you could get from politics, and how active an important activity is in politics, they realize that these individuals will be going against them. They could possibly be voting against them because they do not agree with them.
So with that, just let me interrupt for a second on that, because some of the key elements that I was picking up on is the student body in general. So if you took and you polled across the student body, they would have more leanings to the Republican, or at least a conservative thought process, versus looking at what's out there based on what's going on in the Democrat or the left, or even libertarian thought processes. So how's that fare out in any type of straw polling, if you will?
Yeah, out of all the colleagues that I meet at the high school, obviously, if they're liberal, they're going to say it to me. They're going to disagree with me, and that's okay. That's what's important about our society, that we can disagree, but still civil discourse. But when I asked the average member of our high school, or the student of our high school, whether or not they align with the conservative or the liberal movement, most of them, I'd say probably about 70% of them, would say roughly that they agree with the conservative movement. And because of this, we hold that ideological majority, but still the staff of the high school are democratically and liberal controlled. And ironically, the same instance is happening at the school board level. The school board obviously isn't elected as a Democrat or a Republican as a candidate, but they still will have their political beliefs, and they shouldn't be in this in what they're deciding. But it does get through, and the school board is very democratic and very liberal in their process and thought process, but the county is so Republican and so conservative. And that makes me beg the question:
How that happen?
How'd that happen?
Yeah, how did that happen? I mean, that knowing Medina County like that and what you're bringing forward, you sit there and you go, how in the world you end up with a school board like that? So that's a whole nother idea. When you're going to run for school board.
Yeah, I mean, I personally would like to run for school board in 2025 when I'm eligible. But next election cycle is 2023. We must realize that, sure, school board is not the presidency. It's not the most glamorous office, but it is an office most necessary and important to our future. You are deciding as a school board member, quite literally, the future of our country, deciding how we will train our members of our country to be productive citizens, to be constructive citizens. And because of that, you hold a very important job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a big move. I know that as you heard on the call, the group at the Ohio Fan is taking and definitely building that out to understand how we can run a number of different candidates. And the biggest thing that I've worked on for years and have not, quite frankly, been successful, because a lot of people just kind of look at you sideways, is how do we develop candidates? How do we properly vet the candidates so that we can understand that they're not just going to say one thing and then go in there and do something totally different, which happens more often than anybody likes. So I think that what's happening right now with the different groups here in Ohio, that is really key, is to look at the various school districts, look at who can fill the seats and who will go in and fill those seats and complete them in true principled fashion. And so let me jump here a little bit, because we only got 2.5 minutes left in this segment, is what are you doing on the educational side then? You're in there very well working with trying to figure out how to get in, but what are you doing in educating the students at this point as you can?
A large part of our organization is doing outreach. Now, whilst we are not able to meet in the high school as we would optimally want to, we could still pass out literature. At least we haven't been stopped. We could pass out literature and promotional materials in order to inform our high schoolers of not only liberties, but also of key concepts of the American principles. Obviously, we want to make sure that students are receiving American principles and American ideologies in a more easy to digest manner. I'm not just gonna throw the Federalist Papers at them and say, "Hey, read this; it's going to help you," because it won't help you as much as something that is a little bit easier to digest. Certainly, the whole goal of the easy to digest material is to lead them to articles of papers like the Federalist Papers. But in order to grab them, in order to grab their attention, it's important that we have an easy to digest material. So we'll have promotional materials that are common with certain socially popular events. When Among Us, a video game, was popular a few years ago, we kind of capitalized on that and started passing out Among Us stickers. I believe the saying was "Big Gov is kind of sus," a big thing. So it is through these promotional materials that we inform people that there is another alternative than liberal ideologies. There is common sense principles that we have in the conservative movement that are fiscally responsible, that won't screw you over in the end, and that will make sure that you live a better life.
Well, good. Now we're down to our last few seconds, so I'm going to take us to the close here of the second segment, and it's really critical, folks, to understand that we need to be able to support the activities of different groups, as Aidan has put together. Both number one in my mind is with prayer. Number two is with bringing other resources to bear. And we're going to have that conversation in the third segment about how the old gray hairs out there can take and work together in building that next generation that we've been all calling out for. And that's what Sam Adams is all about. He spent his last years helping the youth move to the next level of achievement. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this last segment of Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they did get it right. And this is Tom Navulis, your host, and I am here with my guest, Aidan Haggard. And we've been having a really great conversation. I really appreciate the time you're giving me, Aidan, and that it's amazing that nothing's much changed. There's an Ecclesiastes 1:9 says there's nothing new under the sun. And when I take a look at that, I sit here and go, okay, but the bigger question becomes, how do we help? I know that when you were on the call, you mentioned that you had your first experience, if you will, and you can clarify that more, with the Medina group. The McFan is what it's called out there, and that's a place that started out as a Tea Party, a citizens group. I've been involved in the Tea Party movement since its inception. I was president of a group out in Washington State that was called We the People, and We the People Washington. I was the chairman for that whole state as well at one point in time. And then as I moved back to Ohio, definitely got involved in some of the different groups that are here. Now, and let me give you a framework. So the framework has been that all started out with a lot of people that were ticked off what they saw was happening with the economy back in 2006, 2007, 2008. They saw Obama come in. They saw the healthcare debacle come about. And next thing you know, you have all these people that are enraged, if you will, and start getting engaged into the political environment that haven't been there for a long period of time. So even starting back at 2008, and we look at now where we are in 2023, a lot of us have gotten gray hair, and I have more gray hair than most. Because of where I am in my life cycle. But with that, the idea of how to engage government, how to learn, how to educate, how to develop constitutionalism, and be those activists that can affect what's going on both in local government, state government, and federal government is the bigger, harder push. Obviously, except I'm sure you're aware of what happened in 2010 when all of those folks got elected there and the Tea Party crowd actually got into office at that time. So what we're looking at, and many of the groups have gone away, quite frankly. The numbers of Tea Party groups that have been out there historically have dwindled down to virtually nothing. Here in Ohio, we have a smattering of different groups. McFan is a great group. Up around, Kirsten's up there and towards the Toledo area, I always say. They have a great group she's been leading. There's a couple groups here in Lake County, Geauga County. So down in Akron area, there's a really good group as well. And a few others that are, splattered through the state of Ohio. And that's the same thing throughout the country, where there may have been 50 to 100 groups. There's now down to 15 or 20 groups in a state. So we've seen that compression for a lot of different reasons, but every time you turned around, there were always 30 to 40 or older that were there. And now they're 50 and older for a lot of the different groups. Some 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds are coming in, but the folks in your age category and generation, or even in the 20s, have not found value within those groups. Some of the comments that I had when I've worked with some younger folks is that, well, those groups are full of nothing but angry old men and women. And went, well, to some, there's truth to that. There's a lot of folks in there because they're frustrated. They don't know what to do. But yet from hearing you, there's some of that same level of frustration, within your peers that potentially is, okay, what do we do? How do we approach and able to win the argument, if you will, and make that effect not only in what you're approaching right now, but in the larger context in society as you move into, further along in your lives. So the question I have for you at this point is, it goes to, again, these teacher, counselors, those that are closest to you, and then in the larger frame of reference, how is it that folks within the different groups that have been in the battle fray for 20 years, if you will, I've been in the battle for almost 50 years now, but the point is that you take and, try and figure out for myself, how do I give you what I have and what I learned, and then how do you help bring that freshness into the various groups and organizations that need it. So with that, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, to start off, I'd like to tell you a story. In August of 2022, I was helping our county Republican Party work the county fair in August. And our biggest goal, obviously, there was a special primary going on because the Supreme Court struck down the maps and what have you. And we were having another primary. And the biggest thing that I was trying to do was encourage individuals to go out and vote, obviously for Republicans, but just by and large, go out and vote. At the time, there was like two candidates, two positions being on the ballot as a proposition. So obviously people were not as encouraged to go vote. But I was, through my youth and Jubilee, trying to exert into people energy and passion, and kind of telling people in a passionate way, you should vote. This is vote like your life depends on it, because it does. And when I did this, and I was very passionate about what I was doing, I was encouraging people. And eventually I started getting a spiel kind of going on that I'd say to everyone, and it worked pretty well. Yeah. And the story took a turn when one of our senior members of our party was like, calm down, kid, take a break, and I think it kind of shows. I know, it's crazy.
It's like, what?
I know. Yeah,
I'd be feeding you some, whatever was juicing you up. I'd be giving you more.
Yeah. I mean, us youth, we need a calling, we need a passion, we need a purpose in life. And I found mine, and this is mine. And because of that, I'm extremely passionate about law and politics. But when he pretty much discouraged my energy and discouraged my drive, not with malicious intent, not with any malfeasance behind it, but just because perhaps it's not what he's used to in the party, but because of this, in my opinion, we must see a more youthful approach and a more vigorous approach that is not often seen in today's politics. If you look at our federal level of offices, I mean, the average age of a representative is 58.4 years, a senator 64.3. But, truly, I don't blame them. To get to the Senate, one either must have a lot of connections or a lot of money. Donald Trump went straight to the top because he had the money. But if an average citizen like you and I were to try to run for president, we're not allowed, we don't have a lot of luck because we need to have all that money or all those connections, and in order to get to those higher offices, you need to start small. I mean, you need to have fulfilled your local offices in order to gain enough popularity. Think county commissioner, your mayor, your school board, the most important of them all. Perhaps if you're successful there in your endeavors, you can move forward to the state House, maybe the state Senate. Mm-hmm. And then at which point you could run for the United States House and the United States Senate. But to tackle all of these responsibilities, and they're not written in law, it's just a responsibility in order to ensure that your next election you win by gaining more popularity. In order to fulfill these responsibilities, it takes time. People are ill content with the fact that our politicians in our country, both Republican and Democrat, are aging. They're of the older statute. But it's because of the way that it's all set up. We have to recognize that it takes a long time to get to the top. And because of that, when you get to the top, you don't want to go back down. You don't want to go from a United States senator to a measly school board member. You want to stay up there, which is why we have people that have been in office for such a long time. But no longer will we experience youth and jubilee like we once had in the White House. Take, for instance, the 37th president of the United States, Richard Milhouse Nixon. Nixon was elected as the vice president when he was 39. 6 years later, he was a small town lawyer. In 6 years, he went from being a lawyer in his small town where he was born in California to the vice president of the United States. And once again, he was only 39. And it was when he was in the office in the White House, he was able to bring that youth, that jubilee into the White House and use that to his advantage. He had a rather successful presidency and vice presidency until his downfall, obviously. But similar was true with Kennedy. Kennedy was rather young for his office, and so was Roosevelt, Theodore. And all these people, we had youth in the White House. Right. But today we see older individuals. And it's because of the fact that we must realize that it takes a long time to get to the top.
So with that, because we're down to just our last 5 minutes, really, is that when we look at how do we meld the generations together? How do we, for instance, how can I help getting the old pillow huggers that to take and actually say, no, wait a minute, we need to take and get somebody to light the firecracker or under the pillow to give the good push and participate with that. And then how is it that, your generation would look at and say, what is it that they have to offer in process or some of the areas that you haven't had an opportunity to cover to help move you through or move all those that would be interested through the processes necessary to affect our general political environment, because it's important. Like you said, that is part of our life as is being a citizen. So go ahead.
Yeah. One of the biggest problems, and it's a problem that I see that the conservative and the Republican movement is facing, is the fact that our leaders are getting older, and we must replace the older individuals in our party when it's deemed fit with younger people. Now, fortunate for us, the Democrats and the liberals have the same problem too. So we have to make sure that we're beating them to the punch. We have to ensure that we are instilling not only in youth, not only educational values such as a love for America, traditional values, and American principles, but also a calling to serve their country. Ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Right. So it's important that we give our youth a calling and a purpose. But with every problem, there comes a solution. An effort must be made to invest in the youth of today to create the party and the movement of tomorrow. We must face that. We must prepare the replacement of the party and prepare the replacement of the movement. It is not out with the old and in with the new. It is simply changing of the guards. Right. We will have similar values, similar rules and regulations, and similar principles, but is of the importance and the essence of our elders in our movement and those who are more experienced with what's going on. It is important that they bestow to us not just financial donations into our campaigns, but also ensure that they are instilling proper values. Those with no values are not only pointless, but dangerous, So it's important that we're given values and reasons to do our work, a calling per se. But it's important that when we do this, we have candidates and individuals who are passionate about what they do. Mm-hmm. And like you said, a proper vetting process is important to this affair. So our investment is not just a financial investment into the future, into the youth, but it's also an investment that will be the future. Right. We must do this for values, to create new purpose, to give us wisdom, give us courage, and to give us hope.
Now, Aidan, I really appreciate everything that you said. Some of the takeaways is that hopefully you and I will continue conversations with one another. We are down to our last minute. And so, I want to wrap it up with that. And just to all the listeners that are out there, one of the critical elements is that you have to open your ears, listen to what's going on. What we're hearing and what we just heard from Aidan is that the values need to be brought forward in a way and articulated in a way that people have clear understanding across all generations, because there's a lot of old folks that they just think Republican. They don't think of the core foundational values that go with that. And it comes down to definitely is what is constitutionalism over party. As a party is only a mechanism to deliver the truth and to deliver what we have from a constitutional republic's perspective. So with that, Aidan, I do want to thank you very much for your time today. And like I said, we'll stay connected and figure out some more conversations and how we can assist and what I may be able to help on those values. But one thing that's important to know is always that Sam Adams, he had it right, and so did those anti-federalists. Come on back next week.